Hey everybody, and welcome to Dominion Cards, the video series where we take a strategic, in-depth look at various cards from the board game Dominion. Today we're looking at Replace. This is a 5-cost action and attack card from the second edition of Intrigue. It says, trash a card from your hand, gain a card costing up to 2 more than it. If the gained card is an action or treasure, put it onto your deck. If it's a victory card, each other player gains a curse. So straight away, what you should be noticing about this card is that it's a variant of Remodel. So the first 2 sentences are exactly the same as what was said on Remodel from the base game, and this card comes with a bonus based on the type of card that you gain. And it costs more because it's a Remodel with a bonus. Now, just like Ironworks, which has bonuses based on the type of card you gain, the same sort of things apply here. So if you gain a card that has both victory and either treasure or action, then you do get both bonuses. And if the card gains has none of those types, so for example it's one of the low cost night cards from Nocturne, then you don't gain any bonus. So if we want to talk about this card, we just need to recap about Remodel. I do have a video on Remodel. I think it's the 4th video in this series. It's quite early on. Remodel. I don't want to just repeat everything that I say in the Remodel video, so I do recommend before you watch this one, if you haven't watched the Remodel video, you should watch that. What I would like to do, instead of repeat myself, is to just focus on what makes Replace different from Remodel, because a lot of the things that fundamentally apply to the strategy around Remodel also apply to Replace, because at the core of the card, Replace is just Remodel, and you tend to use it for the same sorts of reasons. So we're just going to focus on the differences here. So Remodel is at its strongest in the late game when you're using it to earn victory cards. So Remodel is fairly strong and sort of unique-ish among various gainers in that it can gain you really, really expensive cards. If you are prepared to sacrifice an expensive card as well, it can directly gain you provinces, which is pretty strong as far as gainers go. It's less good early on for a whole number of reasons that I go into in the Remodel video. One that is relevant to this particular card that I'm just going to say is that before you are ready to draw your entire deck, Remodel, it's slightly worse than, say, Workshop in the fact that you have to draw it alongside another card, and then you trash that other card without getting to play it, and then the new card goes into your discard. So you sort of have to go a whole shuffle without playing another card as well. I mean, if it's a state, that's fine, but if it's something like Silver, you don't get to play that. And then you have to draw all the way through. And if you're not yet up to speed with drawing your entire deck, then not only are you less likely to match your Remodel with the card you want to trash, but also it's going to be hard to take advantage of the new card that you gained, because it's going to go into your discard and you might not get that far in your draw. So Replace has one nice benefit to sort of counteract this particular negative of Remodel, and that is that if you gain a useful card with it, it'll get top-decked. So now all you have to do is draw one more card by playing a cantrip or like a Drawing Village or something, and you get to take use of that card. So what this means is that Replace is a lot better than Remodel at trying to use it to actually do something meaningful in the middle of your turn. So you could, for example, turn, like say you've got a bunch of villages in your hand but no draw cards. What you could do is you could turn a silver with your Replace into something like a patrol, and then top deck that, play another village, and now you've drawn that patrol and you can use it to carry on drawing the rest of your turn. Now, it doesn't mean that you're going to see something like this very often with Replace, but, that is something that it can do that Remodel is not very good at doing. So it's a little bit better in that regard. Now, there's still all sorts of other reasons why Remodel is not so great early on. For example, it's a stop card that you want to buy early that, you can't, stops you playing other cards in your hand, but, you can use it for these tricks. Now, if you open 5-2, sometimes you have these decks where there is a really nice 4-cost card that you might really, really want to be playing, And when you open 5-2, that's sort of a problem. You might say that 4-3 is a much stronger opening. Well, when Replace is on the board, 5-2s can actually be a little bit nicer in these circumstances, because what you can do is you can get the Replace on the 5, then hopefully you draw it on, say, turn 3, you might be able to turn an estate into that 4 cost that you wanted, and because it gets top decked, you then still get to play it on that shuffle and use it on turn 4. So that can sort of mitigate somewhat the fact that you didn't get quite the opening that you wanted. Now, you might just say, well, why would I not just buy that 4 cost? But what's really nice here is that you actually have the Replace in your deck, and you can use it to start trashing the other estates. You got rid of an estate for that 4 cost. And to be fair, Replace is a card that you're probably going to want to keep in your deck around for the end game anyway, because it's so nice in the end game. You opened with it, you got that opportunity to pick it up, and because of the top decking, you actually got to speed up the early game in a way so that buying the Replace didn't really slow you down. So it's a little bit like how I spoke in the Artisan video, how if you can get the Artisan early, you don't have to worry about giving up having purchased a 5 cost card, because the Artisan can gain that and then top deck it, and you still get to play with that new 5 cost card in the same shuffle. So it's like you're not sacrificing an opportunity cost, the other cheaper card that you might have wanted, because you still get it anyway. Regarding top decking in this sense, the Artisan video, which I think is video 26 in this series, that talks quite a lot about top decking. Now, I have talked about top decking in a number of cards, because so far there have been quite a few cards that deal with top decking. And I really, again, don't want to repeat myself. So please do check the Artisan video if you want to know a little bit more about top decking and stuff that you can do with that. Now, Replace costs 5. This is sort of its main downside compared to Remodel, because otherwise it's Remodel with all upside, except for the fact that it's got this extra price attached. So why is this a problem? Well, Remodel variants are things that you tend to want, particularly for the late game, where they're really good. And so sometimes, because Remodel is nice and cheap at 4, it might be a fairly typical situation is that there are lots of really good cards that you want that cost 5. So this is where all the really good draw cards are, for example. And so you want to be buying something else for 5 all the time. Now, sometimes when you're building your deck doing that, it might be that you miss 5 and you just get a 4 instead. Well, sometimes that's a good opportunity to pick up the Remodel. You know you're going to want it. You missed getting what you actually wanted that turn. Like that will happen sometimes. You don't get to do that with Replace, because Replace costs 5. That means you do actually have to give up one of those good 5 cost purchases in order to get it. Of course, because Replace is a stop card that wants to be paired up with particular targets, just like Remodel, usually you might be better off to just wait until you're drawing your deck anyway, and in that case, the fact that Replace costs 5 isn't really a big deal, because by the time you are drawing all of your deck, you might be prepared to be paying a premium for good cards that you want anyway. If you think of Replace as being this nice payload card that you want for the end of the game, once your deck is under control, it to some extent almost doesn't really matter what it costs, because you're going to be buying it anyway, unless it's extortionate, and 5 isn't extortionate for this. So the fact that Replace costs more means that typically you can't just buy it incidentally on a whim, and often you do need to make the conscious choice to actually pick it up. But Remodel is good, and so Replace is good, and so usually you might be doing that anyway. It also means that Remodel, sometimes you might want to get it early and just hope that you get to turn some estates into nice 3 or 4 cost cards. And it might be that there is some other trasher available, but it's not the fastest trasher in the world. So it might be something like Lookout from Seaside or Raise or something, I don't know, and Forager maybe is a good idea. And so you might be using something else to trash, and you might think to yourself, well, maybe I'll keep around the estates because I've got this remodel as well, and it gets to use the estates, but the remodel doesn't really want to trash the coppers. So I'll trash the copper with the other trash card, and I will save the estates for the remodel. Now, you might not do that with replace, because replace is a little bit harder to actually pick up. You might decide, well, I'm not going to get replace until late in the game because I'd rather be buying these torturers and patrols and laboratories and festivals, things like that instead. So you might as well just get rid of the estates early. They're a lot worse than coppers. And so you don't sort of make those earlier remodels that you would with a remodel, replace. You sort of sometimes you just say, well, okay, I'm just not going to be able to have it early because it costs a little bit more. So one of the main features of replace, and definitely the biggest bonus that it gives over regular remodel, is its a curse if you gain a victory card. It's an attack that gives each of your opponents a curse. Now, Remodel's strongest ability is, as I've explained, is to gain new provinces. Now, replace also gives you a curse when you do this. So in some ways, that could be considered as now a remodel variant that's giving you an extra point when you use it for its main and strongest feature. It's not always going to be true. Sometimes your opponent can trash that curse and it might not actually affect them, like just gaining one curse in the late game that they can draw the whole deck easily and trash it. Well, maybe, so what? Maybe it just didn't matter at all. But sometimes they can't trash it. So an example is that it's the last turn of the game and you use a replace to gain a victory card. Well, you give your opponent a curse and they have no opportunity to trash it because they don't get another turn. So this can be very strong in some situations. Typically, it's going to be strong when the point from the curse matters. So as I've spoken in videos like Gardens, or there is a video 27 where I talk about all the base cards, I explained that Dominion is not necessarily, what am I trying to say here? The points that you end up with, sometimes they are very, very close, and sometimes they aren't close at all. And that doesn't really say anything about how close the game was, just that depending on the kingdom that you've got, sometimes how close people are in score can vary wildly. So with cards like Remodel, sometimes what you will find is that Remodel helps one player to get 5 provinces versus 3, and actually the score is a massive difference. Right there was a 12-point difference in provinces. And in that sort of case, the extra point loss from the curse doesn't matter at all because there was a big 12-point gap between the players, and so having one curse give to your opponent, well, so what? It didn't matter. But sometimes it will actually be very, very close. And in those sorts of cases, the curse really matters, and replace can allow a player to, compete on provinces and get the same amount, but also get this extra tiebreaker point or points, and that is what really helps them to win. So the cursing still happens when you do what we call milling a victory card. So milling a card is where you trash it with a remodel type card and you gain the exact same one back. So what you can do is you can trash a province and gain a province because it gains a card costing up to 2 more, which means you can gain a card of the same cost. So the reason why you do this is because you just want to empty the province pile quickly because you're in the lead. And when you do this with replace, you also throw curses at your opponent. So that's really nice because that just helps you win harder. So not only are you emptying the game, but you're also getting a point lead further while you do it. It also allows you to, if the scores are close, or say you're 6 points behind and there are 2 provinces left, or you might be able to buy one, you might be able to mill one of your existing provinces into another province, and normally that would be the score neutral action, and therefore you and your opponent end up with the same score. Or with replace, you will now be 1 point ahead, and so therefore that will be a win, whereas otherwise it might have been a tie or even a loss on the tie rules. Remodels are typically bad at dealing with 0-cost cards like curses and coppers, because what they do is they often, the only target that they have might be an estate. And that's not great. It's still gaining a point or 2 points, but it's still some rubbish stock card in your deck that you often don't want. So Remodel is typically very, very bad at dealing with all the coppers in your start hand. Now, Replace is nice in that, sure, you turn the copper into an estate, and it's not really getting rid of the number of stock cards in your deck, and it's earned you a point and whatever. But you also curse your opponent when you do it, and therefore you add stop cards into their deck as well. So Replace is a lot better at sort of trying to deal with cursing, in that you get off an attack when you try and turn the curses into an estate. So you don't really get rid of the curses in terms of the number of stop cards in your deck when you do this, but you do throw more curses at your opponent. And sometimes the best way to deal with curses is to make sure your opponent has them all first. So anything that just throws more curses at your opponent is going to be a lot better in that regard. Bear in mind that with Replace, turning a curse into an estate is a 3-point difference, because you get rid of a card that gives you -1, you gain a card that gives you +1, and you give your opponent -1, and that's a 3-point swing in your favour, which is a lot. That's like gaining a duchy, except when you do this and you gain a curse, or you replace a curse into an estate, you essentially got the same points as you'd get from gaining a duchy without actually adding a stop card into your deck. Right, and that actually can add up over time, so that's actually really nice. So be aware that using Replace to deal with the curses that you're gaining actually is gaining you quite a lot of points overall. So Replace, although it's a cursor, it's not a very strong cursor, because typically Replace, you might only gain it quite late, and cursing, you usually want to do it as early as you can. In addition to that, because you're gaining it late, it might not actually empty the curse pile. So one of the things with the card like Witch that you try and get as soon as possible and throw out as many curses as quickly as you can, you're almost certain the curse pile's going to run out, and that can matter for things like 3-pile games. Not so much with cards like Replace. So in addition to that, the curse is given to your opponent after their deck is already under control, so it might be very easy for them to actually trash them. It's going to be less meaningful. If your opponent is already at the stage where they're drawing their entire deck, giving them curses is not so bad. It doesn't clog up their deck as much, and they can trash them very quickly, ideally on the next turn for them. So Replace is not it is an attack, but it's mainly a remodeler first and foremost. Another thing with cursing is that because you usually want to get them out early, the negative points are not anywhere nearly as important as actually jamming up your opponent's deck. Well, here with Replace, because the curses come in late, jamming up your opponent's deck is not always the aim you're going for. You actually care about the curses because they're losing your opponent's points, because it's happening really late and the points might actually matter towards then. So very different from cards like Witch, Replace, even though it's giving curses. We call this, cards like this, soft junkers. Usually that means that they are not, they can junk your opponent, but that's not primarily why you have them. Like, junking your opponent is a really good effect, but you don't necessarily buy Replace just to junk your opponent. This is not always true. There is an exception to this. So in the same way that you can mill provinces, you could actually mill any victory card. So you can choose to try and gain victory cards early, and you'd usually do that by, say, turning an estate into another estate, or maybe even just chopping your coppers into estates. Usually you might want to keep the coppers around and still use them, and you'd rather just mill estates, but you can do that. And you can do that early just to junk your opponent. So bear in mind that what you're doing here, if you choose to do this, is that you are using Replace essentially as a terminal action that is just each other opponent gains a curse. And that's it. It requires you to match it up with the cards that you want to be turning into estates. You know, estates are not great in your deck, which is why you might be milling estates to do this. But sometimes this is a good idea. So because junking is bad and junking is good early, if you're able to get a Replace early, you might be able to just start trying to junk your opponent. It's not the best junker in the world, but it's still a junker, and that can be very good. So this will be good, of course, in the situations when junking is a lot more powerful. So if there is no other trashing except replace, then replace isn't getting rid of stop cards in your opponent's deck. So the more stop cards you can add to their deck, the less in control they're going to be of it. So replace can be actually really nice in situations like that, because the only trasher then is replace, and that's not very good at dealing with curses. So it could be useful to get a replace early and just try and throw as much junk as you can at your opponent with it by just turning estates into estates. Now, just like with Ironworks, and also with cards like Patrol, victory card dual types work well with replace. So Intrigue has a number of these: Mill, Nobles, and Harem. Replace likes these cards that come in Intrigue that are victory dual types because they are even cost cards. So remodel variants like even cost cards because typically you're going to be remodeling like zero cost cards like curses into estates, or you're going to be turning estates into, say, 4 costs. Or if you want to be turning stuff into 6 cost cards to get ready for the end game, usually you would find that you'll be turning your 4 cost cards into 6 cost cards. That's because you want to be like typically gaining, say, golds that cost 6, so you can then remodel them into province. And of course, if you want to gain provinces with a remodel, then you need a 6 cost card to do it usually. So although you might use remodelers to, say, turn silvers into 5 costs, a lot of the time it's the even cost cards that are really the targets of remodel type cards. And in Intrigue, all of the dual victory types, they're all even cost. So here they give a double bonus in that you top deck them and you curse your opponent when you gain them. So replace is really nice. If you could get a replace early, you could turn estates into mills if it's available with replace, and then not only do you essentially turn the estate into a cantrip, which is kind of like getting rid of it from your deck, but you also get to curse your opponent as well, and that's really strong. But bear in mind the same caveat as with the other cards in Intrigue that care about victory cards. Most of the victory dual types, well, not most, but a bunch of them are in Intrigue, and there's really not that many outside of Intrigue. So you've got Island and Seaside, you've got Distant Lands and Adventures, you've got Castles from Empires. How many others are there? Off the top of my head, I'm sure I'm missing some, but as you can see, there's really not that many at all. I guess there's Dame Josephine in the Knights pile. So, you know, this replaces better with these cards. Yes, it is. But you actually, outside of Intrigue, you don't really see it that often. This is really all I wanted to say there. A couple more miscellaneous notes. So, as we talked about in Minion, Minion is a card that is an attack, but the attack is technically optional. The card gives you an option of things you can do, and sometimes you will never launch off an attack. Now, when you use Moat to defend against attacks, the Moat has to be revealed before the person playing the attack card actually decides what to do, if that card gives an option, or before any of its instructions are followed, essentially. So occasionally you might think to yourself, oh, maybe I will replace something to curse my opponent, but they do have to reveal the Moat before you make that decision. So if they reveal a Moat, you might decide to yourself, well, there's no point in like milling an estate, so I'm just going to try and turn it into something a little bit more useful instead. I don't know, it doesn't happen very often, but something to watch out for. And as I've stated in this video, Remodel is a good card, so Replace is also good because Replace is first and foremost a remodel variant. The higher price is not really a drawback, despite costing 5, because you tend to want to buy Replace late, like remodelers, because it's a stop card, it's hard to get early on, and 5 is competitive, and later on you're usually prepared. You know, would you buy a remodel variant at 6? Yeah, probably. So the fact that it costs 5 is still fine, especially as cards you're going to be using late. So a quick summary. Replace is better than Remodel at doing what Remodel does best, which is gaining victory cards. And that's really good for a remodel variant. So, getting a version of a card that just does the same thing, but better for its best use. Remodel does a lot of stuff, but where Remodel really shines is gaining provinces, and Replace just gives you more points and launches this attack as you do that. The higher price makes it harder to use early, but it's nice in a 5-2 opening if you wanted a 4 cost, as we explained earlier. And also, the attack gets better when other forms of trashing are slow, limited, or unavailable at all. So, generally, if the curses are hard to deal with, then Replace's cursing is very good, because Replace itself is bad at dealing with the curses to some extent. So that's it for Replace. Again, if you want to know a little bit more about remodeling in general, then I do recommend the Remodel video. So what we're going to do now is we are going to head over to the online client, and we are going to generate some kingdoms that have Replace, and we're going to see how good Replace is for those kingdoms. Here we have Sentry for trashing and also Trading Post. We have Ironworks that can gain mills, and we can use those to kick off conspirator chains with market. What is the draw? There is no draw, there is also no village. I feel like I would like to trash down with Sentry and then use Militia as the one terminal that I'm going to be playing. Early on, I can buy an Ironworks, use it to gain mills. I can use those mills to easily gain sentries, get a couple of them trashed down, start gaining conspirators with Ironworks. I have got markets to get buys, so I might be able to get quite a bunch. Might even be able to get enough money to go up to double province, because you get quite a lot of money between conspirator, market, and militia. Would I then use Replace? I don't know. So Replace would only really be good here. Early on, you just want sentries. Later on, you want some markets. It would be good to mill provinces, but even then, militia is still pretty good. Replace would be nice to have on the final turn, but when are you buying it? You might get a chance to buy it, but your deck really has very limited capacity for stop cards, and at some point, the provinces really are going to clog up your deck. So I just noticed we've got Pawn as well, which is nice if we ever get 2 just to help kick off conspirators. So I don't think I use Replace here. I don't think there's any good Replace targets. We've got better trashing, and we don't have any ability to draw, which really hurts. Replace Remodel variants like having large hand sizes, and this game, most of the time, we're probably going to have 3 card hand sizes for pretty much the whole game. So, yeah. So Replace, not so good there. I think it would be easier to just buy an estate or a duchy, or maybe you just have more mills, and that's going to matter more. So let's see this board here. So we have Mining Village and Patrol. We also have Shantytown as a village. So we've got draw. We can draw our deck. We have Bridge as payload, which is really good. We also have Conspirator for a lot of money, but I don't think we need it because we got Bridge. So Artisan can be picking up patrols. We even have Lurker to be gaining more patrols. I don't know how much I like a Lurker. I think Artisan is a lot nicer rather than having 2 Lurkers. But so here's the thing. We can use Replace to trash stuff, and then Lurker could gain whatever you trash. But what would you be trashing with Replace? I mean, technically what you could do is you could replace your Artisan into a province, curse your opponent, and then lurk back the Artisan, draw it, and then still get to play it. And that sounds pretty cute, actually. Replace seems quite nice in that regard. So the big problem in this deck, actually, that I haven't really addressed, the only trashing is a Trading Post and Replace. Trading Post is not very good at getting you thin, but it will happen eventually. So I think we really want a Trading Post as early as possible. We really want to get thin because we want to save as many actions as we can for playing bridges. The fact that one of our 2 village piles is Shantytown that isn't going to be drawing most of the time eventually really hurts our ability to draw a lot of bridges to play. So we got to get super thin. I think that I would like to replace it. It's easy to pick one up with Artisan late, and I think maybe we might be able to pull off tricks, but then again, will we actually have any lurkers? How good is lurker on an onslaught of just having a whole bunch of bridges? And I'm not sure it is. I think we will at some point, as we start buying bridges, eventually be able to pick up some conspirators, and we can then just use the bonus buys from bridges to pick up a lot of cheap cards. I actually don't think we'll be using lurker, and I don't know that we will be using replace on Artisan to gain province, but maybe we can, or maybe we just hope to. Well, maybe it will have some use to do that. I don't really see replace being useful early to gain a lot of stuff. I guess you could, if you are able to start drawing your whole deck early enough, you could be replacing some of those silvers you get with Trading Post into like more patrols, or into conspirators or mining villages or something, or bridges. That seems okay. Replace, though, there's just so much powerful payload on this board with bridge and Artisan. It's sort of... then again, the cursing is really good, isn't it? I think my opponent's unlikely to have moats because patrols are way better. Curses are quite nice because the only way to get rid of them is Trading Post. Well, then again, it's still okay to do that. I'm not so sure about replace here. I'm certainly not buying it early. Maybe we get one, but I just don't know if we're going to be having cards like Lurker in our deck to really take advantage of it. But even just milling provinces, I think whether we go for replace is really going to depend upon how many bridges we get and how our deck ends up, how good it is at drawing it. It could be that we end up in a situation where we just cannot draw our deck very well and we just can't play that many bridges. And if that ends up being the case, then replace is actually going to be quite nice. And so we can just pick one up with Artisan when the opportunity arises, and we can then use it to start trying to give off some cursing and gain those provinces, because we're just going to struggle to buy a load of them with bridges, possibly because the draw's not so great. That's my guess as to how that will go. I think you have to play this deck a little bit by ear. Replace has use, it seems. You have to see, I think. But you can certainly see reasons why it might be good. So here, I know straight away, we've got Chapel to thin down quite a lot. We've also got Masquerade for good trashing. We have a regular village. We have Library as the only draw. We have Mine, but so what? What do we do here? So, I mean, we can trash down a lot. We can use Mining Village and Library to draw. But then what are we doing for money? Well, it seems like Baron's going to be really good here, actually. If we can get a load of villages, throne rooms, we can start gaining estates with Baron, and we can start discarding them with Barons, and then draw up with Library. So that seems really nice, and we've got throne room if we need it. Maybe we have some poachers as well. How good is Replace? Replace will eventually start cursing your opponent, and that's nice because Library is the only draw, although your opponent will have Chapels, possibly Masquerades. Yeah, so that means that the cursing doesn't feel as good. But we will have a lot of estates, and you can always replace the estate into an estate and throw out the curse. But Replace doesn't feel super great here just because there is other reasonable payload, and trashing them is easy. And I don't really care about mid-turn replacing and top decking. Having said that, because Library is our main draw, there might actually be more opportunities to do mid-turn stuff, but we're going to be super thin with Chapel, so what things are we going to be trashing except towards the late game? So Replace here doesn't seem super great. We certainly don't need something like Bureaucrat to gain silvers, because what 5-cost cards are we gaining? There's only Library is the only one we care about, and we don't actually need that many of them. There's a lot more 4-cost cards we want, but I think we're better off just buying them. So we trash down with Chapel, eventually we pick up a Baron, we have an estate, maybe we keep we keep an estate around and a Baron, and soon we start picking up mining villages, poachers, throne rooms. We will eventually get a Library, and then we add more barons to the mix and more villages. And soon we're generating quite a lot of money through barons, just playing them and possibly even discarding the same estate over and over. You might be able to play a baron, discard the estate, play poacher, draw the estate back up again if you've managed to draw everything, which might be difficult with the library, but at some point it will be possible. So I think Baron is the main thing here, and Replace is not so useful. I don't think the bonuses work. And, are we really gaining any golds in that deck? Ideally, no, if Library is the only draw. What do we have here? Moneylender and Trading Post are our main trashing. We have Moat, Village, and Library, and... Sorry, why did I say Moat, Village? Sorry, we have Moat, Library, and Council Room as the main draw. We have Swindler as an attack, which is pretty nasty. We have a Conspirator. We want to use Trading Post and Moneylenders to start trashing down. We need Trading Post to get rid of the estates. Eventually that can be replaced into something like a gold. Seems nice. I am wondering if Moat is a better draw card than Library, Council Room here, because it protects us from Swindler. So what's the problem with Swindler on this board? Swindler can turn villages into silvers. It can turn throne rooms and conspirators. Sorry, village into silver. Throne room and conspirators can all go into a load of moneylenders. That's real bad. Moats into an estate. 5-cost cards into trading posts instead of duchies. That's also really bad. Swindler's very strong on this board, I think. I'm almost tempted that you need to build an engine. You want to be playing Swindler as much as you can. I actually think Moat is good for the defence on this board, which very rarely happens in 2-player. But the other draw alternatives, Library, Council Room, are not actually very nice. So I really want to be building like Village and Moat engine. That's going to be hard to kick off a lot of Conspirator stuff, I think, but I think you're going to be able to do it. There is Throne Room as well, which is quite nice. So Village, Moat, Throne Room. Do I want plus buy? Maybe I get 1 Council Room for the plus buy. Seems like that might be nice, actually. The other thing is Council Room sort of doesn't help. If your opponent goes Library, then your extra draw from Council Room... sort of, your opponent's library, they're not worse, but they lose some of the benefit of going a library route as well. So if you see your opponent pick up library, you're okay to also then grab a council room. I think if my opponent doesn't go for moats, I want to be drawing my deck, playing as much Swindler as possible. So I'm going to pick up a trading post, I'm going to pick up a moneylender. I will open... I don't know if I want to open Swindler and moneylender. I guess I could open Silver and moneylender to really get the trading post early. I'm okay early on. If Swindler hits a bunch of silvers, it's fine. Eventually I will get a replace. I can replace some of the silvers that I get into throne rooms, villages, conspirators. I will just convert them. And maybe Swindler will turn some coppers into curses, and I can replace those curses into moats. And hey, I get to top deck the moat then, which protects me for the next turn, potentially, if I played Replace late. Replace seems like it's pretty good here. After the trading post, there's not that much competition for 5. I will eventually get there, and so I'll be able to pick up a Replace at some point. But otherwise, I really... Man, you want to get all these moats and villages, but where's the buy coming from? There's only council room. Maybe Replace is a lot better so that you can pick these up early. But I still... Maybe I don't want the trading post early, actually. Maybe what I want to do is get a moneylender, and I want to instead get a Replace instead of trading post, and I turn any estates into throne rooms and villages, and I turn any curses that I get into moats. And that helps me get the engine components that I want. Maybe that's a lot better. Okay, yeah, I think that is. I think I'm not getting trading post. I'm getting Replace and moneylender instead. I think Replace is really good here then. It's the gainer that helps you gain the engine components that you need. And you can eventually just annihilate your opponent with Swindler. If they don't go for the moat engine, Swindler, you should be able to play that a lot and absolutely trash your opponent. They will have a deck filled with moneylenders, filled with trading posts. It's going to be real bad for them. So yeah, I really like replace here. I think it is actually the first 5 that you get, which you don't see very often, even if you're not opening 5-2, I'd still get replace first. If you do open 5-2, I would get replace. Maybe, and I guess I'd get a moat, and I'd look to, first of all, turn an estate into a money lender as my first 4, if I haven't bought one already. So yeah, replace seems really good on that board, actually. Hope it doesn't get swindled. Here is the last kingdom. We have no trashing outside of replace and mine. So it looks like what we want to be doing is getting villages of like village and mining village and patrol to draw. I want to be drawing my whole deck. Maybe I have some wishing wells. And then I want to be mining the treasures that I start with up to golds, and then I want to replace them into provinces. That sounds pretty good. And I will eventually have a replace as well. I can turn the estates into mills, probably, and curse my opponent. That's quite nice, actually, because how do you get rid of curses? Well, there's only replace. So curses are real bad, and we get to turn early estates into mills. So that's pretty good. We also have Swindler turning the coppers into curses. Replace can turn those curses into pawns, which then get to do +1 card, +1 action, and that's sort of like getting rid of the curse. It's not super great. You might actually be better off turning the curses into estates and just throwing more curses at your opponent, because the curses are real bad. So I'm definitely building the engine. I want to draw my deck. I do actually want to mine. I think I get the replace way before I get the mine, but I actually want to focus on drawing first. And patrol does draw any curses, so if swindlers turn any coppers into curses, patrol will draw them more easily. I want mills. They also get drawn pretty nice with patrol. So, yep, I think the focus is get a swindler, focus on drawing your deck, and then I'll be buying more villages with 3. I really want patrols. So I open mill and swindler, I think. I think I go for that. And then I look to gain patrols and I gain villages. Once I'm drawing, I'm going to grab a replace, I'm going to grab a mine, and I'm going to build up while attacking with swindler and try and cause some damage. And man, you want to be turning patrols. I think, do you want to turn them into duchies initially? Maybe not, because patrol can draw the duchies. I guess you're always turning, if you hit either of these cards, you're turning them into mines for your opponent. You're turning 3 costs into probably more swindlers, maybe not. Maybe silvers are fine, actually. Just give your opponent more silvers if you hit their villages, stuff. But they can mine them, but yeah, maybe that's better. Just stop cards. 4 cost is bureaucrat. That's pretty bad to have. So yeah, so swindler causes havoc. All of the nice price points, it's just nightmare. You don't want to hit 6 and 8, but you know, all of these other ones are pretty nice. Actually, you might, if they replace curses into pawns, you might be able to swindle the pawns back into estates or something. I don't know. Yeah, so replace is good here as the only non-treasure, as the only trasher, and there's a lot of good targets for remodel type stuff, and there's a dual type, so you get to take special advantage. And the cursing is real bad as well, because replace is the only trasher. So by cursing is bad, I mean it's bad for your opponent. It's actually really good at cursing attacks here. So there we go. That was replace. As you can see, it's a nice general purpose card. Sometimes there's just better stuff going on, but otherwise there's stuff you could do, like remodel. It's pretty good overall, actually. Usually it's not so bad. If you can pick at least one up in a lot of games, it's actually pretty decent a lot of the time. So, yeah, thank you for watching. I hope that's useful for you, and I'll see you next time. Goodbye.